What is up, guys? Welcome back to a brand new Pokemon Duel video. Today we're going to be discussing the meta and just generally the entire tournament for week 1 of the YouTuber tournament, the common figure exclusive tournament between me and 31 other YouTubers that play Pokemon Duel. This has been a lot of fun so far. I think a lot of you guys are enjoying the content that's coming from it, so let's just jump right in. So right now, guys, we have the winner's side to talk about. The 10 decks that I have recorded and finished, analyzed, and put into different archetypes are all just right here, and we're just going to discuss them right now. So first off, we've got one pure beatdown deck. This means that there are no gimmicks with it. There's no status effects with it. It's basically just throw your fantastic, powerful figures with very powerful physicals in general and X attacks and double chances to ensure that you have the best chance at hitting a high physical versus the low physical your opponent might be hitting, or even boost the high physical above the highest physical that your opponent might have. And there's nothing else to it. You just beat on your opponent until you take over their entry points and then farther take over their goal. I thought we were going to see a lot more of these decks, but it turns out that they lost to some of the more gimmicky or strategy-oriented decks in this particular meta with common figures. So that's something kind of interesting to note, in my opinion. Next up, guys, we have Goomy Control. Now, Goomy Control is an archetype that everyone has been sort of aware of since we started discussing the common figure meta and just generally the archetypes that are going to be surrounding it. So Goomy Control revolves around status ailments. It revolves around board control and matchup control, making sure you have the best odds of being able to, first of all, give your opponent some sort of status infliction, and then make sure that your opponent gets knocked out so Goomy can just work its way through over to the goal, swap with whatever's on the goal, and win the match by default. Now, a whopping 3 Goomy Control decks won their first match. Now, is this a fluke or is this indicative of an actual meta that's going to start taking shape? I'm not exactly sure, because going into week 1, you can't be sure whether or not that you're going to be seeing the best decks that you possibly can. And I think that there are a few of them that we're going to discuss in just a short bit here that might be better than Goomy Control overall when you consider the potential that they have. But there is something to be said for what people think is the best deck right off the bat and how well that's going to do moving forward. So in comparison to some of the other decks that won their first matches, I'm not sure it's the best, but it's definitely one of the most used decks and is really, really powerful, at least in the first week meta. Next up, guys, we've got mid-range beatdown. Now, this is sort of an interesting strategy, and again, something I expect to see a little bit more of in future matches and future weeks. Basically, it revolves around having 2 different modes, okay? First off, if you have a combo deck you're going up against, for instance, the Spinda and Esper control decks we're going to talk about very shortly, then maybe you want to take out the combo pieces really, really fast. So in that case, it would be more of an aggressive deck. You'd have more of an aggressive playstyle. You place your Larons, you place your runners, whatever they may be, try to inflict status ailments. I mean, this is something that you'd expect from an aggressive deck. But the thing is that it's not a pure beatdown deck in the same way, because there's also Pokemon like Shelgon and possibly Laron in some cases as well that are going to be extremely defensive and hard to get rid of. So you can't throw it into the pure beatdown archetype because there are some aspects of it that revolve around pure defense when it's necessary, and against a pure beatdown deck, it probably wins most times. See, the great thing about this deck is that no matter who you're going up against, there is a way to win, okay? If you're going combo versus full beatdown, pure beatdown, I mean, this is not something that you're going to be able to win with if you don't take out the combo pieces, but you can properly defend if you have mid-range beatdown because you have something to defend with, as opposed to pure beatdown when you really don't. So just sort of discussing that, you guys can probably see why 2 full decks of mid-range beatdown made it into the winning side of the bracket. Alright, guys, next up we've got Esper Control. Now, this is a deck that one of Jet Erickson's viewers came up with, and then Jet sort of figured out how to make it better, and then I picked it up from him because we did a couple practice matches, and I realized going into week 1 we probably wouldn't see anything that would directly counter that deck other than maybe Goomy, and it was a chance I was willing to take because I doubt people would be really aware of this strategy. So basically, Esper Control revolves around setting up Spinda against an opposing figure and then having Esper behind the Spinda, usually in the middle, but sometimes it can work on side to side as well. Actually, sometimes it works better side to side. But that's beside the point. So basically, you confuse your Spinda, and it gives it an almost 80% chance to roll into a 1-star purple move. But this purple move makes it so it benches your opposing Pokemon and gives it weight 1, which is basically just a straight up knockout if you consider the fact that just going back and forth, you're going to see a lot of knockouts on both sides and go down to 4 figures pretty quickly right off when you're starting a match with common figures anyways. So me and Jet were the only two that I'm aware of that played full-on Esper Control this week, and both of us took our matches. I'm not exactly sure if it's going to be something I play going into week 2. I think it's still a good strategy, but as you guys saw in my match, it was actually pretty close. And if I didn't get lucky with Poliwag rolling into some Hypnosis for me, I probably would have lost my first matchup. So it's not something I really think is reliable enough to play in the long run, but right now in week 1, I think that it's probably pretty good. And going into week 2, it might still be pretty good. Now, I'm really curious to see if a lot of people are going to pick up Esper Control moving into week 2 after seeing it and seeing what Esper can really do when given the opportunity. So it's something I'm excited to see more of and just generally analyze in the future, and then counters and all that. It's going to be great. I love the way meta is going to work in this. Not being able to change your deck makes it so you need to sort of think about things in advance. Overall, it's just really, really cool in my opinion, and I like seeing meta sort of develop right in front of me. So my final thoughts on Esper Control is basically that it's really decent when you're starting out in a meta that's not defined yet, but once people start to pick up other decks, pick up maybe some counters to Esper, which there are a few that we will discuss in future videos, not right now, but there are a few counters to it. So I will just sort of leave that open, leave that for your interpretation. But I do think it's a good deck, and it definitely was great for a first week choice. Next up, guys, we've got Spinda Control. Now, this is a really interesting deck Pokefodder actually brought to the table for his first matchup. No one else in the entire tournament played it as far as I'm aware at this point in time. It relies on confusing key opponents that are really, really bad when they're confused, and then giving status moves to other opponents and basically paralyzing or burning them. And that's just sort of important when you're playing a game like this where you're going to have like beatdown decks you're going up against, especially in week 1. You want to have something that can challenge those, weaken them a little bit, give them really, really huge miss slices. I mean, it's important, so I can definitely see why this deck in particular did very well and brought him the win. Finally, guys, we've got one more deck to talk about on the winner's side, which is Poliwag Geodude Lockdown. Basically, this deck relies on getting Poliwag to one of the opposing entry points and then putting Geodude directly to the left of the goal defender. Now, if Geodude knocks itself out and the opponent cannot block off Poliwag or block off the goal by getting on it, then you obviously win the match. But the thing is that Geodude has an evolution, so even if it self-destructs, even if you get blocked off, then it does give you Graveler, which is a fantastic Pokemon in this particular meta, and probably in the whole meta for the entire tournament. It's going to be something that's really, really good. The thing is that if you can't replace the goal defender and Geodude knocks out the opposing Pokemon, or even Graveler knocks out the opposing Pokemon or pushes it back, then you just win the match. It can even get knocked out itself on an opponent's turn, and you're going to be able to take the goal anyways. So it's a pretty consistent strategy, and I just think that it's probably got a lot of potential moving forward. Poliwag is probably the best runner we have access to, so that's why that fits in for the runner position. And putting stuff to sleep is extremely valuable in this particular meta. So I do think we're going to see a lot more of this moving forward. This particular strategy is something I personally could have used in my deck that I use normally with Esper and Spinda as a secondary win condition, and I really wasn't even thinking about it moving into it. So that's something I'll think about a little bit more moving forward in setups and everything, and I do think that other people are going to start to adopt this playstyle in particular, because it was so brutal going up against his opponent. Shout out to Whisper for coming up with it, because it was a great strategy, really. So I just have a few questions I'd like to ask you guys, and then if you want to go ahead and respond in the comment section or on my Discord server, link is in the description below, I'd love to discuss it. So first off, do you guys think we're going to see a lot more Esper moving into week 2? I think it's a viable strategy, although I've sort of discussed some of the problems I have with it in this video. So what do you guys think? Do you think it's overpowered, or do you think that it's something that's going to get countered pretty quickly and that the meta is going to move on from it pretty fast? I'd love to hear your thoughts. So next up, guys, I'd like to discuss if Goomy is too powerful. Now, We didn't really talk too much about this, and I haven't seen a lot of people discussing it too much in comment sections or in the server alike. But I will say that Goomy control does make up the biggest share of the winner's side meta at this point in time, so it is worth discussing if he is too powerful. Now, I'm not going to be banning him. I don't think he's ban worthy. There are counters to him if he actually did become too oppressive in the winner's side meta, or even in the loser's side meta to where everyone's playing him. It's constant mirror matches. That would just be boring for you guys, which is, again, something we're going to discuss in a minute, but that's why I actually restricted Shelgon and Lairon, for those of you that don't know. But basically, is Goomy too powerful? Again, would love to hear your thoughts. Now, as far as Shelgon and Lairon, some of you guys had a lot of issues with me restricting them, and I understand why you had issues with it. I, at the time when I was doing it, didn't necessarily want to do it, but I did what you call a suspect test, where I tested out a Shelgon and Lairon deck, so 3 of each in the deck, against a whole bunch of different opponents. And while it didn't have the best win rate and it was pretty easy for people to tear apart at some point, it still took minutes and minutes and minutes to finish the match finally. And it was just a slog fest where people were trying to hit status effects on all of them and they couldn't get past them. And sometimes they lose their status effect Pokemon, so they have to cycle through them. And it made it so the meta was going to be an unhealthy amount of just boring. Okay, and this tournament is first and foremost for you guys to watch and not necessarily for the tournament participants to be extremely competitive about. Now, don't get me wrong, it's a competitive tournament, but I do think there's something to be said for banning or restricting things in an effort to make things creative and fun for you guys. So that's exactly what we did. We restrict them down to 1, makes it so you can't lock things down with 2 Shelgons, and status ailments can actually do something for you. Decks that revolve around using them can actually get stuff done. I mean, overall, I just think that it was something that was necessary for the tournament to be more interesting and fun for you guys. So finally, guys, in these videos, I am going to be discussing my next opponent's playstyle and just generally their deck as a whole. But unfortunately, my next opponent didn't get to play his first match because his opponent for the first match had to drop because he couldn't record his match. So unfortunately, I have nothing to actually put here and discuss because I can't check his playstyle because he didn't play any matches yet. So, you know, I hope we do okay. I'm going in blind like week 1, except he's been able to see my strategy and deck. So I guess we'll see how it goes. But let's just hope for the best. But yeah, guys, just so you are totally aware, I'm going to be doing a nice little unboxing in the very near future. I'm very excited for that. So keep an eye out for that, guys. And we're going to be doing a bunch of other stuff with this beautiful little beast right here. This is a Magwell or Magewell USB HDMI capture card. It's a fantastic little device, and I'm super excited for how it's going to boost my productivity as a whole. And I'll get more into that when I make my first video and possibly stream with it the first time. So that's basically it for this video, guys. Hope you enjoyed the video. Hope to see you back here for the next video. The next match in the tournament's coming very shortly. Hope you guys are hyped. But yeah, guys, that's gonna be about it for this one. Hope you guys enjoyed the video. Hope to see you back here for the next video. The next match is coming very, very shortly, and until then,